So with your permission, I will speak in French. If it's okay, I think you have the devices allowing you to understand what I say, which is usually not easy. Et donc, je vais m'exprimer en...
So, as I was just saying, I will be addressing you in French. I'd like to begin by thanking each and every one of you. I know that this has been a very busy day, so I thank you for carving out the time to meet this afternoon with Christophe, with your humble servant, myself, and with our respective teams. A great pleasure to welcome you, ladies and gentlemen of the press, as is always the case. Particularly a pleasure to welcome you on this first day of the French presidency of the Security Council. We'll be exercising the presidency for the entire month of March. The unique feature of this afternoon's press conference is that it is the first step in an unprecedented expression of Franco-German partnership here in New York. I'm going to suggest that I deliver an opening statement in 3 parts before opening the floor to your questions. I'll begin by explaining to you the philosophy and mindset underpinning this joint Franco-German approach that is shared both by the French and German teams, spearheaded by myself and Christophe Heusgen. After that, Christophe will share with you the joint approach that France and Germany will be pursuing in terms of the working methods for the Security Council, which is very important as well. And thirdly, we will in turn, that is myself, your humble servant, and Christophe, the ambassador of Germany, share with you the closely coordinated priorities of the French presidency in the month of March and the German presidency in the month of April. So with that menu before us, hopefully an appetizing and tantalizing one, I will begin by just sharing a few words on the philosophy underpinning this unique and innovative joint Franco-German approach to the presidency of the Security Council. As I think many of you might know, we decided to seize this golden opportunity of having successive presidencies by France in March and Germany in April, which was a pure happy coincidence. It turned out like that simply because of the alphabetical way in which presidencies are selected for the Security Council. And so we decided, as we would be working successive presidencies, we would join together with our working teams and closely coordinate our programs of work to make sure that they were dovetailed and harmonized with one another. If I could sum it all up in one word, the purpose and the philosophy of this approach, this twin presidency of the French and German delegations. It is innovative. As well as being innovative, it is also pragmatic in its approach. So innovative in principle and pragmatic in approach. This is not a merging or a coalescing of the two presidencies. Rather, it is an expression of close cooperation between both presidencies, fully respecting the right of each of the two partners to identify their priorities during their respective months of presidency. And we pursued this common or twinned approach with 3 purposes in mind. The first is to re-galvanize the Franco-German partnership here in New York in the framework or context of the United Nations. The second objective or purpose that explains this twinned approach is the need that we see to defend and uphold European values as good Europeans and to contribute to voicing here in the heart of the United Nations a strong European perspective, which I think the world needs today. And the third goal or purpose, which flows very neatly from the first 2, is to defend or uphold multilateralism. It seems to us that multilateralism is currently under siege, and upholding multilateralism is vital because multilateralism is more needed than ever in today's world, particularly given that it's being so sorely tested. And this joint or twinned Franco-German approach, both innovative and pragmatic, forms part of our joint efforts being pursued with others as well to reform, renew, recast and refound multilateralism, to re-galvanize it as a principle at a time or juncture when, as I've just said, we believe this is more necessary than ever, that need to safeguard and defend multilateralism. So in just a few words, in a nutshell, and I could expound upon this at much greater length, but I'm aware of time, that is, in a nutshell, the philosophy, the mindset which explains and steers this innovative partnership between France and Germany in our exercise of the 2 presidencies through the months of March and April of the Security Council. I'll now give the floor to Christophe to expound further, if you will, particularly touching on the working methods of the Security Council.
And thank you all for coming on a Friday afternoon to this briefing. We see your interest in in our briefing also a bit reflected the interest in this absolutely new development in the Security Council, that you have two presidencies that follow each other, that actually try to have joint presidencies. And I would like to add one element to the three elements that François has mentioned that are behind our jumelage, the German-French partenariat, which through the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle that was concluded a few weeks ago here has another expression. The European voice that we want to strengthen through our joint presidencies, and the overarching goal to defend and strengthen multilateralism, and we want to do that with this new approach. And maybe we want to also give an incentive to others to think how we can strengthen with a new way how to approach the work, how to strengthen this multilateral. I want to add one element. When we presented this morning and this afternoon the joint presidency, we realized that something that is absolutely natural for François and me, for our generation and future generation, that this German-French friendship, many people still see in the historic context of two countries that fought 3 wars in the span of 70 years, and that now, since Konrad Adenauer and de Gaulle, we have found to a friendship, a relationship which is as intense as you cannot imagine. And this, what has been able to achieve from arch enemies to the closest friends, is something that gives an example. And we just a few weeks ago saw how the Greeks and the North Macedonians were able, after 20 years or 30 years, to actually come to an agreement. And I think this, for the many conflicts we have, I think to a certain degree maybe this gives also a new thought, or maybe an incentive. What Germany and France has, what we're able to achieve, we can also achieve. Maybe the goal is too high, but I just wanted to share that with you. Now let's go to the very practicalities of our daily life. For somebody like me who is somebody who for the first time has a post in New York and is for the first time in the Security Council, we thought that the working methods, maybe there is some room for improvement. And what we have looked at, and our teams, by the way, who work very well together in a remarkable way, what we have also looked at is the famous Note 507. The Note 507, which you are all familiar with, which looks at the working methods. How can we do it? And we will try in 2 months to see to it if we cannot achieve some progress on this. What do I mean? What we would just see to it if we cannot make a bit more efficient use of the time in the council, and we would like to follow a few guidelines. First, we would like to see to it that we get a bit more exchange. You all follow these. You have briefers, and then you have the 15 members speak one after the other, and it's rather exceptional that then there is an exchange. We would like to encourage this. We would like to encourage the two-finger rule, that people then ask questions or make comments in relation to remarks that have been made by a previous speakers. Talking about briefers, briefers are key. They are the special representatives either of the Council or of the Secretary General. Most of the cases, they are the people on the ground. And we yesterday had 2 fantastic briefers on Syria and on Myanmar. And they give their briefs. What we will try to do by talking also to them, that the members get their speaking notes, their briefs, a bit in advance, so that we know what the substance is of what they say, and then we ask the briefers to concentrate on operational issues or on recommendations, which would also then allow for the speakers to directly go back and respond to these questions that they ask, the recommendations they give, the initiatives they want to take. We will also try then to motivate speakers around the table that they speak, as is suggested in note 5 or 7, for 5 minutes only. I think this is something that we see there are many who are very disciplined, but there are others maybe who then repeat what has been said before. Sometimes, when you have 3 briefers and 3 foreign ministers, it takes 5 minutes after, everybody greets, the briefers and the foreign and everything. This could be done once by the presidency, and then everybody goes directly into. I don't know if this is going to work, but if you add up, we need some time. But so there are some possibilities. We also would like then, if we gain some time, we would like the briefers who usually speak at the beginning and then don't speak again. They do this in close consultations, but in the chamber they don't come back. We want also to have this possibility that the speakers come back then to questions that are asked to them, so we have a bit more. The proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but this is our intention. And if we make some progress, we come again to that what François mentioned at the very beginning, and that is give a new impulse to multilateralism, impulse to this body here, which is in the end the core of multilateralism, at least with regard to preservation of peace and security. So to the programs.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Christophe. I'd just like to say something on this reform of the working methods, and I know you very well. Some of us might be a bit blasé, but I don't think we should be blasé or laid back. We really do need to reform the working methods, and seriously, and without further ado, we need to do this. If we really need to breathe new life and new creativity into the multilateralism that we believe in more than ever. So that's really behind our efforts. If I were to sum up, I would say that our aim, our French and German initiative, is to have a process initiated that would allow for true exchanges within the Security Council. The idea is to encourage each other to step back from autopilot, to move away from postures in order to better serve the very raison d'etre of the Security Council, constantly finding day and night areas of agreement in order to achieve decisions, not just words, but decisions to help peace and security. If I were to sum up, that is how I would sum up. I'd also like to make a slightly personal comment, and I don't want to go into the reform of working methods. When they launch a missile, servicemen say fire and forget. I'm launching my missile, and through its head it goes and finds its target. Within the Security Council, amongst ourselves, it's a bit the same. We seem to just vote and forget. Vote and forget. So we work, and sometimes we have a text, and then there's such pressure that we have to move on to another text, another subject. And I really do believe that here we need to change our methods as well. We need to have a fundamental rethink. When the Security Council agrees upon a text, a resolution, for example, we need to coordinate between the different Security Council members in order to really implement this text. I very firmly believe this. If there's anybody who's interested in continuing the discussion on this, even just one person, I'd be delighted to do so with that person. Now on the substantial priorities of the Security Council for March. So if we really do simplify things, in March and April, we're going to look at all different issues, all of the different crises. For example, in March, there are going to be a lot of mandate renewals, MONUSCO, UNMISS, UNAMA, UNSOM. There will be the briefing and the visit of Ms. Mogherini from the European Union, Mr. Lakchak on the OSCE, and many other things. But if I were to give you a thread running through, I would say that as far as March is concerned, and indeed most of April, there are three main priorities, political ones and then a geographical one, or policy ones rather. The first topical rather priority is the situation and role of women in conflict situations. This is a huge, vast subject. It affects the protection of women, and it also involves women's empowerment and participation in political processes. It's a vast subject. I'm not going to go on in more depth about it here. That is rallying more people, and increasingly it is touching at the very heart of the decision-making process and the work of the United Nations. And that is a good thing. So we have different things on this, including on in the silence of the CSW, an area formula meeting in particular on the participation of women in political processes. This will be co-chaired by two of our ministers. For France, it will be Minister Marlene Schiappa, and you know her. Germany, too, will organise a high-level open debate on sexual violence against women in conflict in April, and Christoph will talk to you about that later. So the first topical priority is women in conflict situations. The second such priority that both France and Germany share is strengthening international humanitarian law. Two top events will take place, and I'm summing up. This is on the 1st of April, and Christoph will talk to you about this in more detail. There's a meeting and an area formula meeting chaired by the French and German foreign ministers on the protection of humanitarian and medical staff, and a Security Council briefing on the respect of international humanitarian law that we're seeking to promote. So the idea here is to promote international humanitarian law very specifically in terms of how it is implemented. The third such priority is combating the financing of terrorism. You know that this is an extremely important topic. You know that the United Nations has really been focusing very intently on this over recent years. We will organise an open debate on combating the financing of terrorism on the 28th of March. And at that time, we intend to present a resolution on this important issue that is a policy of our foreign a priority rather of our foreign policy. I'm going to come back to that later if you like. So those are our three topical priorities. Our geographic priority, among many others, is Mali and the Sahel. So for this reason, there is going to be a Security Council mission to Mali and to Burkina Faso. The idea is both to evaluate the implementation of the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in Mali and the role of MINUSMA, but also to support the G5 Sahel Joint Force as it combats terrorism in the Sahel region. Following that visit, that mission, we will organise a ministerial meeting on Mali here in New York. That is a meeting of the Council, and there are two foreign ministers will participate, as well as the Secretary General and the Malian Prime Minister. So these really in broad brush strokes of really simplifying things, these are the priorities that will guide France and also the German presidency that will follow, because all of the priorities were defined together. Thank you. Christoph.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, and you will see in the outline of our program that this is all part of these overarching three objectives. I will add maybe a fourth objective with, and I come to that, this is disarmament. And we were very happy this morning when we presented this to the outline of our program, that it was welcomed by all the 15 members of the Security Council. So with regard to humanitarian issues, we will have on the 1st of April, as François said, in the presence of the French and the German foreign minister, humanitarian issues on the agenda, an ARIA formula meeting on the protection of humanitarian workers and personnel, and the afternoon briefing on international humanitarian law with these very concrete examples and cases to look at. On the 2nd of April, our foreign minister will still be here, and we'll have a briefing to support the implementation of the NPT, of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. That is 1 year before the review conference of the NPT, to give a new impetus to this debate, which we'll have next year. We'll have on the 3rd of April MINUJUST, the mission in Haiti, and for this we have invited the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Bachelet, to brief on the human rights situation. Again, it's a human rights issue. The same will hold true on the 9th of April, where we have a briefing by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi. On the Women, Peace and Security agenda, as there will be the debate during the French presidency, we'll have during our presidency then on the 11th of April an open debate on women in peacekeeping. This will be chaired by our Minister of Defense, who is a woman, and the Secretary General is planning to be there in person and will present his strategy to double the numbers of women in military and police UN operations. And then on the 23rd of April, we will have a high-level open debate on conflict-related sexual violence, chaired by our Foreign Minister, and with a number of briefers. Again, the Secretary General himself said that he has an interest to participate in this. On the margins of this, we want to do, as a follow-up to the debate French have in March, would like to have a meeting where we look to the 20th anniversary of 1325, the Women, Peace and Security resolution, 20th anniversary next year, and we would like to have an event where we ask member states to come up with concrete commitments where what they want to achieve and they are ready to achieve by the anniversary, just to give the 1325 another push. And then on the 29th of April, we have open debate on Middle East. We have a few ARIA meetings also on related issues, but I don't want to go too much into details right now. And from my side, that's it. Yes.
Merci beaucoup, Christophe.
Thank you very much, Christophe. I just wanted to say something very quickly, to say that our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jean-Yves Le Drian, will be here in New York from the 28th of March to the 2nd of April, so quite a long period of time. The idea is for him in particular to do the following, and this is not exclusive, not exhaustive rather. He will chair the open debate on combating the financing of terrorism, and I talked to you about that. That is on the 28th of March. Then he will participate in the high-level debate on climate. He will speak during the ministerial meeting on peacekeeping. That's something else. He will chair the ministerial meeting on Mali on the 29th of March, and he will participate in the ministerial meeting organized under the German presidency on the 1st of 2nd of April that Christophe has just talked to us about. So all difficult questions should go to Christophe, and all easy questions should go to me, your humble servant.
The easy questions, and which are the difficult questions?
Messieurs les présidents,
Presidents, speaking on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, thank you for taking the time in your busy agendas to introduce the programs of work to us this afternoon. We really look forward to interacting with you day in, day out, and I'm sure several times a day throughout this twin presidency. I'm Carla Jane from Agence France Presse. My question is on North Korea.
What follow-up the Council plans to give to the Hanoi summit? Do you expect the U.S. to come in and brief you on the results or lack of results of that summit? And how do you see the debate on sanctions going forward, given that it's increasingly divisive at the Security Council?
I wanted to give this question to François, but he considers this a difficult question. No, I respond because I'm the chairman of the 1718 Committee on North Korea, on DPRK sanctions. At this stage I cannot. I have to see what the U.S. If they want to give a briefing, if we discuss it, I cannot say. I can only say that from the perspective of the 1718 Committee, chairman, I'm of course in the hands of member states. But the basic line of the Sanctions Committee, of course, is that we look at the danger of the threat that we have from the nuclear program of North Korea, and the sanctions were installed to achieve the objective of the international community. And the objective of the international community is to come to a complete, verifiable, irreversible end of the nuclear program of North Korea. And if you read the result of the summit as I do it, we are not anywhere close to this objective. So from my perspective, for the coming weeks and months, I don't see right now any reason to look at the sanctions regime. It's a tough regime. I think that the sanctions that have been adopted by the Security Council contributed to the negotiations that have been taking place, and I think, and by the way, that the international community was ready to impose these tough sanctions is actually a very good outcome of functioning multilateralism. But as a chairman, I don't see that right now there is a need to change the sanctions regime.
Je veux dire un mot dans le même.
If I could add something to build upon what Christophe has just said, I think that the 3 rounds of sanctions that have been adopted by the Security Council on the North Korea file have brought pressure to bear, which has been a very useful and effective form of leverage to pry open once again the political process that we're currently engaged in today. I think it's a real success story in terms of pressure being exercised by the Security Council. It needs to be duly understood and accepted as such as a success story. Secondly, I would say that no tangible progress has yet been made on the political track, which we're still on. And it seems, therefore, to us that the lifting or the lightening of sanctions is not something that should be on the agenda of the Security Council. The time really isn't nigh for those discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press. First of all, I note that in the footnotes for both months, there's no mention of Venezuela. So is that a sign that the Security Council has now deemed that to be kind of a futile exercise in light of yesterday? And secondly, in view of the attention given to the Maduro regime and its repression and so forth, and the humanitarian crisis, I'm wondering why there's nothing on the agenda for either month regarding Cameroon, where we have thousands of Anglophones been killed. We have repression of a dictator of almost 4 decades. Obviously, the stifling of freedom of expression. I mean, I don't have to go on, but is there any reason why Cameroon is not included as part of either the mission or on the agenda? Thank you.
D'abord sur merci.
Thank you very much for your question. Starting with Venezuela, together we participated yesterday in what was an impasse, a deadlock in the Security Council with entrenched positions that it wasn't possible to reconcile. And each of us heard the different points of view expressed in yesterday afternoon's Security Council's meeting. Does that mean that we should simply throw up our hands? Of course not. The resolution of the crisis continues to be an objective. We have other tools that we can use and other premises that we can work in, particularly the International Contact Group, which France is a member of. Does that mean that the Security Council should be excluded for the future? Not at all. And yesterday, it was, as I said, it was clear that we had reached an impasse at the Security Council, but that doesn't mean that we shall give up working. We shall continue working in the Security Council, but also in other fora and using other tools and using all possible bilateral channels and tools. Our main concern, our main purpose, and here I'm speaking on behalf of France, is to ensure that the people of Venezuela can be heard and can take their own future into their own hands. Our desire is that they can speak freely and that they can re-guide their own future. They can take responsibility for their own fate once again. We will continue to focus on that. We will continue to focus on meeting the humanitarian needs, particularly as the flow of refugees shows no let-up. On Cameroon, the situation is indeed difficult and sensitive for reasons of which you're very well aware. The situation is not being ignored. There are a lot of bilateral contacts going on. Cameroon is being addressed in the various African fora, and I think it would therefore be erroneous to believe that the situation in Cameroon is not being dealt with and is not the focus of attention at the international level. That is far from being the case. It is discussed on a daily basis through bilateral channels, both in the African setting and also through the appropriate plurilateral channels.
Sylviane Zehil from L'Orient Le Jour. Vous allez
Microphone, please, for the speaker.
bientôt se réunir pour discuter.
It's my understanding that you will soon be meeting to discuss Resolution 1701. I would like in that context to ask you whether, and I would say that that resolution talks about the comprehensive implementation of the resolutions of Resolution 1559, and I'm talking about the April Programme of Work. Now, this resolution calls for the disarmament of all armed groups in Lebanon in order to ensure that nobody has weapons without the consent of the Lebanese government, and no other authorization may be sought than that of the Lebanese government to own or have weapons. Yesterday, the United Kingdom spoke about the Hezbollah group, calling it a terrorist group, distinguishing between the political and armed wings of Hezbollah. Hezbollah being a Shiite group and has become the dominant force in Lebanon after the elections in May on its political track or political wing. What is the point of view of France, or indeed of the European Union, if we're speaking more broadly, and therefore of Germany as well, on that particular issue of Hezbollah in Lebanon? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. As far as France is concerned, and before I turn things over to Christophe, I would simply weigh in very briefly to say, firstly, that our position on Hezbollah is very well known, has been very well expressed in the past by senior ranking officials from my country, and so I will not repeat what they have said today because I think that would keep us here too long. But France's position on Hezbollah is well known and well substantiated. Secondly, I think that the particular friendship for our Lebanese friends is something that we see tangibly here in New York as well. I've just left a meeting where I engaged with the ambassador of Lebanon, a meeting that I was at together with Christophe. We had a discussion, and that relationship is at the heart of the ties that bind together France and Lebanon. It is a very warm relationship without an equivalent. I'm sorry, I was just trying to refine the thread of your questions. I got a little muddled. Hezbollah I've already touched upon.
Pareil.
As far as the European Union is concerned, much has been said in the past with regard to our position on Lebanon. Perhaps I could say, as a third point, or a third string to this particular bow, If I respond to just part of your question, then I will be leaving to the side what I believe is part of one of the key points of the action as the United Nations. I'm speaking wearing my hat as representative here at the United Nations. And one of our core objectives within the United Nations as far as Lebanon is concerned, and I'm speaking here as a friend of Lebanon and as well as the penholder on the Lebanese file, is to maintain the unity of the Security Council on Lebanon. And this is the compass that guides our action here in New York and Lebanon. It's not very easy all the time, but the fact that over the last few years we have, thanks to a great deal of sweat and effort, been able to achieve unanimity in the Security Council repeatedly on key issues, including issues that you have just referred to, including the disarmament of local militia in Lebanon, just to take one example, which is one of the more thorny and sensitive issues as far as Lebanon is concerned. That is one of the key objectives of France here in New York, is to maintain that sense of unanimity on Lebanon and on the Lebanon dossier. And in so doing, to keep a very close eye on the Lebanese dossier here in New York. Thank you very much.
I can only briefly add to it that, as some of you may know, or probably not many, UNIFIL is the second operation where Germany has a number of soldiers. We have the maritime component of UNIFIL, and therefore we follow developments, of course, very, very closely. With regard to Hezbollah, there is nothing that we decide here in New York. These are decisions that are taken by the government and by the European Union. And what François said with regard to to keep the unity of the Security Council holds true for the European Union. The decision to have the political arm of Hezbollah subscribe, of course, has to be thoroughly thought through. I mean, we don't have illusions about, but at the same time, you have to work and you want to work with the government. And what consequences follow when you have then part of the government maybe on listed. This, of course, has to be thought through. So I think these are decisions that have to be taken on the level of the European Union and well thought through. Thank you.
Michelle Nichols from Reuters. About the high level of interest. Thanks. Michelle.
I will keep it short. North Korea, follow up to Carol's question. Last year, the meeting on human rights abuses in North Korea was postponed. Some of us presumed, rightly or wrongly, that may have been to do with the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Now that summit has been held, will you try to push to hold that meeting during either of your presidencies? I count at least 8 votes, and I'm sure you could probably find the 9th vote if you really tried. So if you could give us an update on that. And on Myanmar, yesterday we heard about the lack of progress. Is the Council planning to try and take any action on Myanmar?
Well, with regard to North Korea, the summit just took place, and we have to look now how we proceed. You know that both for France and Germany, human rights questions are very high on our agenda, and we just have to see how we will follow up. With regard to the Sanctions Committee related to human rights, humanitarian issues, you may have seen that there. With regard to humanitarian exceptions, some were granted, and so that actually the situation of the people that suffer under this regime is maybe a bit alleviated. With regard to Myanmar, I just didn't get the question.
It was mainly to do with Britain circulated a resolution in December. Is the Council going to try and take any kind of action on Myanmar? Nothing's happened with regard to returns. So do you think the Council should get involved?
Well, at this stage, and I have to ask François, because he was already last year, of course, in Security Council, we have a new, fairly new special envoy, and the special envoy has been had her first report yesterday to the Security Council. She explained, maybe also to the media, I don't know, she explained the very complex situation there. Of course, we need to do everything that the return of the Rohingya is possible, but they have to come under circumstances which allow for such a return. And this is a very difficult process. At the same time, you have to work with the government, the military, and this has been a very secluded regime and country, and one has to really see how do we get to the objective, and there the right thing have to be looked at. There was one issue which I wanted to highlight there, that with regard to accountability, there are so many around the table who said that this is really key, that you have to fight against impunity, that you have to accountability for what has happened, also to prevent that this occurs again.
Thank you. I just want to say something myself on Myanmar regarding Michelle's question. We are not saying anything. I believe that there was, under the French presidency, on the 6th of November 2017, I believe, we adopted a significant presidential statement on Myanmar. It talked about the roadmap and the priorities, the three main areas: humanitarian issues in the broadest sense of that term, what is needed to create conditions for a possible return of refugees. Those conditions have not yet been met. Combating impunity, secondly, and all that implies. And thirdly, in the medium term, the implementation of the Annan Commission roadmap, and we took an initiative during our presidency of bringing that together, and there were a lot of issues also pertaining to citizenship. So we do have a roadmap. I think it would be wrong for us within the Security Council to say, well, we really can't do anything. We do have a roadmap. It means that on the 6th of November 2017, if I'm not mistaken about the date, it was adopted unanimously, and it gives us it gives us something to act. So there should be no excuse. Now, should we go further? Yes, Michelle, that is a question we ought to be asking ourselves. We believe that over and beyond some gestures that have been made by the Burmese government, we are very far away from an ideal situation. Things are moving far too slowly. And so, to be frank, there needs to be pressure exerted. The international community needs to exert pressure on the Burmese situation. So we should ensure that the commitments that have been taken be implemented if we really want to make true progress on the three areas that I talked about. So we do have a roadmap. We do have something tangible, and we should work with the tools that we have to hand.
Thank you very much. Betül Yürük with the Turkish news agency Anadolu. A follow-up question on Myanmar as well. After 18 months, do you think it's time maybe for the Security Council to impose sanctions to put pressure on Myanmar?
Well, with regard to Myanmar, I just said, first of all, we have this feuille de route. I just said how important it is to look at accountability and see to it that those who have committed these horrible crimes are brought to justice. Now, in the discussions that have been taking place in the Security Council so far, the emphasis was on accountability to get at these people. At the same time, of course, you have to see that the government works and that the government actually sets the preconditions, the conditions for a safe return that fulfills all the conditions that we have set. At this stage, the question of sanctions was not on the agenda. Of course, when you want to adopt sanctions, of course, you have to have the numbers there, and we have to look at that instrument. I would say that we, as a Security Council, are well advised also to see to it that the advice that is given by the special representative, whose objective is to have this return of the refugees and advise how to deal, that we should listen also to this. And we'll have her come back earlier again, and we'll have to go from there. But I don't know, François, if last year's sanctions were on the agenda, what, how do you see that?
Non, merci.
Yes, on that question of sanctions, if the question is to know whether conditions are in place to establish sanctions, that is a question. If the question is the threat of sanctions something that could be used as a lever, the response, I do believe, would be yes. I can't really be clearer on that. Secondly, on the human rights question, I just forgot what Michelle asked about as well. I do believe that in the situation we're in today in the United Nations, as representatives of countries that are struggling to promote human rights, struggling against often strong headwinds, we cannot and we do not have the right to just leave human rights to one side. Be this, even if there are important political negotiations. No, it's not possible. It's not who we are. So based on this reasoning, the real question, Michelle, and you alluded to it, is if we want it, can we today, as a procedural vote, get the 9 necessary votes to enable us to evoke the human rights situation in North Korea? This is the question.
Merci. Alors,
thank you. There is a very difficult question, so it should perhaps be for the German ambassador.
Because there is a sense of unity of Europe in seeing this, and probably Europe. My name is Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York, Radio Radicale in Rome. So there is a sense of unity for Europe, and so I congratulate you for this showing. But in reality, Europe, when you see a Europe, there is not that unity so much. And I could say many problems, one on migrants and so on. But my question is about the Security Council representation, eventually reform. Just Monday, the Foreign Minister of Russia, Lavrov, said that the Security Council needs a reform, and there is too much European representation. That's his word. So my question is, how Europe can show its unity in showing a position about Security Council reform, if it ever would be reformed, and not instead showing, again, division. And I could just mention, for example, the position of Germany and Italy. Thank you.
Since it was directed to me, first of all, let me say with regard to European unity, I'm sure you heard what the French ambassador said with regard to the overriding principles for these 2 months is to have a strong European united voice. And when you have been over the last year been a regular to come to Security Council meetings, you must have witnessed some of the many stakeouts that the European ambassadors in the UN have made. The last one this week on Venezuela, where we not only have the current members but also the past members, including, by the way, our good friend, the Italian ambassador. Now, with regard to Security Council reform, I think that, and there I totally agree with the Russian ambassador, that the Russian foreign minister, that we need a Security Council reform. The Security Council does not, in its present composition, reflect the realities of this world, and there also you can see. I think it was a close meeting, but the intergovernmental negotiations that took place earlier this week, France and Germany spoke again with one voice on this, and we need to have reforms. We are not even close to have a discussion, should there be more Europeans there, because there is a blockade that we don't even get to a text-based negotiations where the different options that are, and Italy and Germany are not in all details on the same line, but we don't even have a basis from which we can start to negotiate to do this reform. And I take your remark maybe as a signal of readiness, that also the country from there you come is ready to go into this direction, that we have a text-based negotiation where the different options are there, and then we make for it. Because if you don't reform the Security Council, the Security Council will lose legitimacy, and therefore I think we should really work forward again. Here I'm also very grateful for the close cooperation between Germany and France with regard to the position on the reform.
If I can just add something on that topic as well. In our minds, the key to UN reform and its credibility in the long term is openness. Openness works through three different areas. So the openness of the Security Council, the expansion of the Security Council, that is a strategic aim that France has, and I do believe that it is Germany's strategic aim as well. So on this, we don't just have a shared joint opinion on this. We want an enlargement of the Security Council in the two different categories, non-permanent and permanent. In permanent category, India, Brazil, Germany and Japan, and equitable representation of Africans. And so that is the first crucial part of it. If we believe in the UN and the representative nature of the Security Council, we need to ensure that enlargements be a success sooner rather than later. The second pillar for openness is that of partnership. The UN cannot be recognized as the center of gravity for multilateralism throughout the world unless the UN can step up partnerships, for example, with the African Union, in the peace and security area. That is an extremely promising partnership. Or, for example, with the World Bank in the area of development. So these two partnerships are extremely dynamic today. The third area of openness is openness to civil society, openness to the business world, to NGOs, to trade unions, all of these stakeholders that breathe life into the UN. I do believe that if together we are able, of course this is going to take time, to have success in all of these three areas of openness, then this is going to be helpful for the future and the credibility and the success of the Security Council. And the reform of the Security Council through its enlargement is one of the key areas and is indeed a priority of our diplomacy for this reason. Perhaps we can have a question with Elisabeth at the back, and then Lisa. Microphone for the speaker, please.
Est-ce que ça a été difficile?
Was it difficult to set up this twinned presidency? That's a technical question. And what was the response from your counterparts in the Security Council in particular, from member states?
It was incredibly difficult because it's so tough to work with our French colleagues. No, listen, it's we actually the exercise of putting the program together was really, it was a pleasure to work together. We see, we have this common objective work together to strengthen the multilateralism, and with France and Germany, who to have the same objectives here, and to put this together and give this new impetus. I can only see it from my team and what I witnessed on your side, that there is a lot of enthusiasm putting it together. So there was no problem. I think it was even an incentive for our teams, but I speak under your control. And I mentioned a bit earlier about the reaction, and I was even struck by the very positive reaction that we reached earlier, a bit informal, but then today in the more formal meeting. So a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of support for this, and I even felt a bit of a yearning for something new that gives a new drive to this. This was but maybe Germans are a bit too idealistic. But François,
I have nothing to add because I cannot agree more. And I think you said it all. There is enthusiasm, very positive. Il y a une réponse, pardonnez-moi, très.
The reaction was very positive, the reaction to the Franco-German initiative in and of itself, but also a positive reaction to what it represents as the winds of change and innovation in the United Nations. So on both of those fronts, it was very welcome. It was very striking, in fact. It was very striking this morning in the Security Council, the reaction. Does that include the Russians and the Americans, says the speaker? From the American side, yes. From the Russian side, you'd have to ask them.
Merci beaucoup. Melissa Kent, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I missed a small part, so I'm sorry if you've spoken about it, but I was wondering if you could give us more information on the Security Council trip to Mali, the dates, who will be represented at Mali, where you'll be going. Will you be going to Gao, Kidal, Timbuktu, and what the point is of the trip? And second, for both of you, si ça serait possible d'avoir une
Would it be possible, if it would be possible to have some of the answer in English?
Notice that this joint presidency happens to be taking place at the same time that we're expecting a big Brexit vote. And you spoke about a European voice, and I'm wondering if that was just coincidence.
D'abord un tout petit.
Very briefly, perhaps that is not as important to you, but we're talking about twin presidencies or joint presidencies, and I want to make it very clear that we're talking about plural presidencies. This is not a joint or twin presidency, but these are twin presidencies, and that's a very important point as far as we're concerned. These are two separate presidencies that have twinned together. On Mali, the Security Council will visit Mali and Burkina Faso for security reasons. I'm afraid I can't tell you more about that for the time being. I can't give you the dates, nor can I tell you exactly or precisely where we intend to visit. We will meet with key actors in civil society, with leading members of the government, and the purposes of the field visit I already addressed earlier, but as far as the modalities are concerned, it's a little bit earlier. We can get back to you on that in a few days' time.
The second question, when Britain 2 years ago asked for the Article 50, they looked on the calendar and thought, when does Germany and France have the Presidency Security Council? No, I must say, with regard to our relationship with Great Britain, we have a wonderful cooperation here. They are part and integral part, and we have seen this I've seen this since I'm in Security Council. On all the issues, there was a European voice, which Great Britain a very strong member of, and so we, whatever happens with regard to Brexit, our intention will be to continue to work very close with Great Britain to have this common European voice.
We had Ali and then Sherbin.
And then?
Si les traducteurs continuent.
Hi there, Frank Uciardo from TRT World. Thank you for having this press conference. I hope we see the two of you together doing this several times over the next 2 months. That would be fantastic. I'd love that. Talking about the cooperation, it seemed to me this was spawned from an item that you wrote as an op-ed piece back last August for the Financial Times that you both collaborated on. And there was a line in there that struck me where you wrote, as the world is confronted with unprecedented global challenges, American commitment to our shared values and common solutions has rarely been more critical. So it seemed to me that the article was kind of speaking to the U.S. not sharing your values.
No, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we have a situation with our American friends where there are Security Council resolutions that have been adopted jointly, and which now the U.S. administration is not following through. And just two examples: the JCPOA. That was endorsed by a Security Council resolution, and the American government has taken its distance from it, or take the decision to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is against a Security Council resolution 478. So when we say we want to strengthen multilateralism, that we want to strengthen a rules-based order, the IRC are all those who don't follow the rules-based order. And unfortunately, we have seen that the U.S. administration, on, for instance, on these examples, have not followed a rules-based order.
Certains développements.
Certain developments might have pushed our German colleagues into the arms of the French, which is very much welcome by us. But all joking aside, our general perspective, our general view that I've explained to you all time and again, and you've listened very patiently, is that in today's world, we do need a committed and engaged United States of America, which is still present on the world stage. I often use personal anecdotes from my time as the ambassador of France to Washington a few years ago. My key message to the White House, to Congress, was to say to the administration at the time, give us breathing room, don't micromanage the world. And my message today to our American friends, and I wish to convey that message through all possible channels, is, dear American friends, remain engaged in world affairs, remain also engaged and committed through the United Nations.
Afraid if you call me Gaullist, you know, of course, it holds true what François just said, and I said earlier when we discussed North Korea, how important multilateralism was for the United States, and on the North Korean sanctions. If we hadn't agreed, all of us at the Security Council, I mean, we were not member yet, but we would have voted yes, then I think all this North Korea policy that has led now to a stop of the missile testing would not have been possible. So there is a big advantage of multilateralism, and we want to convince our American friends to remain engaged. We need them, absolutely.
Thank you, ambassadors. We've witnessed Security Council failures in the past few years regarding the situation in Syria and yesterday in Venezuela. I wonder whether you have in mind any alternative forums to deal with the big issues in the world, and what those will be regarding the situation in Venezuela specifically. My other question connected is whether you would encourage other countries in the Security Council from the same continents to do the same kind of joint presidency and cooperation in the Security Council, and what will the implication be then? Thank you.
Frankly, we have no lesson to give to any country, and you recognize here the long tradition of French modesty and humility, which is really part of our DNA.
As to your first question, indeed, solutions can be found elsewhere other than in the United Nations. We're currently chairing the G7 for the time being, and in that capacity, France is seeking to drive forward an innovative approach to the various files under the G7 umbrella, including policy. The same is true for the Normandy format on the question of Ukraine, which we co-lead with Germany, and I could give you myriad such examples. But that doesn't detract from the fact that there is a single organization that enjoys uncontested and unchallenged legitimacy to take decisions on the matter of international peace and security, and that's the Security Council. There is no other alternative out there, however hard you might search for it. Now, the only solution is dialogue, and together with dialogue, if necessary, decision-taking within the Security Council. That's the understanding as far as France is concerned, and that is why, together with Germany, we often seek to act as a bridge, a go-between the different actors and the different sides and camps to try and bring people together and ferret out consensus. And so I really don't think that in addition to all of that, we can give up. Venezuela may well come back to the Security Council. We also have, for the time being, the international contact group that's been set up on Venezuela, which can continue to work on this dossier. There's the matter of humanitarian aid, which is something that we cannot afford to relent on either. We need to continue to press ahead with that. But if you look at the current government, it's difficult to know whether it would be possible to reform it as it currently stands. The Security Council, in its response, will not give up its primordial responsibility for ensuring international peace and security, because it is the only legitimate body that can take action along those lines, unless anybody can find me an example of another body that enjoys such legitimacy and can take such actions to uphold and safeguard international peace and security. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Majid Ghali, Rudao Media Network. Ambassador Doulacht, speaking of vote and forget, ISIS accountability resolution has been almost 1.5 years since it has been adopted. True, there's a team now in Iraq, but with no tangible result in terms of evidence gathering. What will your presidency will do with that regard? And my second question is to both of you about ISIS foreign terrorist fighters. These are your country's citizens, your country's daughters and sons committed crimes against the people of Iraq, Kurdistan, Syria. And now there is this talk about not letting them come back to Europe. Don't you think it's time for Europe to take responsibility of the action of its citizens, actions that were vital in creating this monster, which is ISIS? Two easy questions, thank you.
I will be very brief in responding to these questions. I just want to check you have your headset on. Very succinctly, the fight against impunity, as ISIS is seeking, is and will remain one of our chief priorities, preventing such impunity. Actions are already underway. You referred to what was decided on in Iraq 1.5 years ago after a real fight, after real combat. I don't want to go into an exhaustive list, but there are many other venues and many other paths through which we can, and in which we are indeed tackling the issue of impunity for foreign terrorist fighters and for the members of ISIS in general. I recall Bosnia when I was in the cabinet of President Chirac at that time, and we found a way to bring Karadzic and Mladic and other war criminals in The Hague for years. I'm not speaking to you here directly, but for years we were told you will never succeed, this is on a hiding to nothing. It did take time, it took a great deal of time, I have to acknowledge that, but we painstakingly put together the files, the cases, we gathered the evidence, we set up a force to arrest them, and Mladic and Karadzic were arrested and were put behind bars. So our hope is that this can be repeated. This will be no walk in the park. It won't be easy, but we hope that the critical mass of the international community demanding the same for ISIS combatants will lead to the same results, and that those responsible will be held accountable and placed behind bars. I genuinely believe that that is what will happen, and we will not let up our pressure as far as this subject is concerned. Certainly as far as France is concerned, I think I'm not speaking out of turn and saying that I'm sure the Germans think the same thing.
Everything to prevent impunity. I said that before on another case we have right now with regard to members of the Syrian regime in Germany where we have universal jurisdiction. We have now concrete cases where people have been arrested and for grave crimes and will be put in front of their judges. With regard to the question of the return of citizens, German citizens, you absolutely have a point. German citizens also have the right to return to their country. What has to be done is, first of all, to verify that there is a German nationality, but then at the same time we have the obligation to see to it that we don't put that from these returnees there is no danger coming from it. Therefore, we have to see what that we know, that we gather facts, that we gather evidence, that maybe they also have to be then put in front of a judge, and we have to see where this is done. And if they return to Germany, we have to have these facts. We have to have a possibility to see to it that they don't then cause a security risk for the population. I think unfortunately we stayed longer than we intended, and you also want to have an evening. We have to leave. Thank you very much.